What is going on, ladies and gentlemen? Welcome to another edition of Touchline Talk here on 110 Sports. We have a Champions League final. I have 3 words for you: margin of error. Yes, I went on that whole spiel on Tuesday about how money can't buy you Champions League success and that you can't bankroll your way into winning this competition. But at the same time, what money can buy you is a margin of error and the ability to make mistakes, or the ability to force your opponent to be pretty much perfect in order to beat you. And that's what we saw in both of these semifinals. Starting with Leipzig PSG, Leipzig started out fairly well, and then it just didn't really go anywhere for them. Bottom line is that if you're trying to beat PSG in the Champions League semifinals, you cannot have that poor of an outing from Golaski in net. Your goalie has to be better. He has to make better decisions. He has to handle the ball better. You were gifting PSG chances, and PSG were going to create enough chances by themselves to give them every opportunity to win this game. You can't hand a team like PSG those extra chances. That's what Atalanta was so good, and why they almost were able to survive in the quarters, is because they took advantage of their chances, and they just sort of hung on and didn't give PSG anything that PSG didn't earn themselves. They played about as close to a perfect game as you can in those circumstances. They gave themselves an opportunity. Leipzig did not give themselves any opportunity to win this game. And I also talked about Leipzig's pressing on Tuesday. What happened was that PSG's press bothered Leipzig way more than Leipzig's bothered PSG. Leipzig were giving the ball away in dangerous areas, specifically Golaski from the goalkeeper position, and you just can't do that if you're RB Leipzig trying to beat this PSG team that's now confident, feels like they've sort of gotten over the hump to a certain extent by not losing that game to Atalanta. And you get Angel Di Maria back. And he made all the difference in the world in this game. And you've got Mbappe. You can throw that front three together now. And what it does is, not only does it give you something a little bit different in Di Maria, who is more of a creator. You saw, he set up the first goal with his corner kick. He just has a little bit different skill set than Mbappe and Neymar, who are all, one-on-one pace goal scorers first and foremost. Not that they can't create chances for others, but it's just a nice balance between the three of them, and you were missing that without Di Maria and without having Mbappe in the starting lineup. Di Maria was great, and he's sort of the forgotten guy sometimes because, he made the high-profile move to he's played for Man U and all these teams, and the United thing was just a disaster. But all of a sudden, he's found a nice home. He fits what this team is trying to do. He's still an excellent player, and you saw that in this game. And so your result is 3-0 in convincing fashion, and Neymar didn't have the pressure on him anymore. He still missed a chance he should have scored at the beginning of this game, and is still not converting his chances, which is going to be a problem when you get to Sunday in the final. But you can let him play a little bit freer with a little bit less pressure when you have an Mbappe and you have a Di Maria creating chances for you. So all of a sudden, it's not as big of a deal that Neymar doesn't convert that chance, because he's not carrying this entire load. And so you can just sort of ask him to do his thing and to create something like that incredible flick he had for Di Maria's goal. That's the kind of thing he can do, and he's just playing free, and there's nothing to suggest he's built to carry a team to a Champions League final and to win this competition the way that Messi and Ronaldo have in years past. And that's fine. That doesn't mean he's not an incredible player. That doesn't mean he can't be the quote-unquote best player on a team that wins this thing. But that pressure he was facing against Atalanta, because Mbappe was not on the field yet, and because the chances were falling to him, and because he just didn't have that much to work with in attack when you compare to what he had to work with in this game, it put an immense amount of pressure on him, and he didn't handle it well. All of a sudden now he's just part of a really good front three. They're interchangeable. They're difficult to deal with. They've got pace. It was a comprehensive performance from PSG, a confident performance, which to me is one of the most important things. They look like they belong and actually believe, and that's big for a team that just has fallen short in this competition time and time again. They were simply the better team. They were the better team on paper, and again, it looked for a little bit like Leipzig was going to make this interesting, but then you start making mistakes, and PSG finds a way to punish you and works their own magic, and you've got a very uninspiring 3-0 comprehensive victory for PSG, who are on to the Champions League final for the first time. Same scoreline in Lyon Bayern. Different game, though. Still about margin of error, but in a different sense. Memphis Depay and Akambi both have early chances. Lyon can be up 2-0. They come out ready to go. They're the aggressor. They look really good, full of confidence, full of energy, creating chances, but they can't take them. And when you have that kind of, when you're Memphis Depay and you have an open net, yes, it was a difficult angle, but you also saw what Cornet was able to do against Manchester City. That's sort of what it was a different situation, but it sort of reminded me of that. There's a path to the net where nobody is in between the ball and the goal. It just takes some technical skill, and it's a big ask, but if you're Lyon and that's the guy you want on the ball in that opportunity, and if you're going to make a Champions League final, Memphis Depay's got to convert that chance. And Akambi gets one too. They came ready to go. You got to give Rudy Garcia and this team credit. But what happens when you don't take your chances? Serge Gnabry comes down the other side of the field, 60 seconds later, and turns into Iron Robin and fires just an absolute beauty into the top corner. And all of a sudden it's 1-0 Bayern, and Bayern have not been playing well and haven't even gotten into the game yet. And so then Bayern settles into this game. And Lyon, credit to them, didn't drop their heads, kept playing. They still created chances. It wasn't like this was over the minute that Gnabry scored. But, again, your best chances came early. You didn't take them. It's just a different world when you're playing 1-0 up as opposed to 1-0 down. And you're trying to chase a game against Bayern. And Bayern just kept coming, and then you get your second goal. I don't know how Lewandowski didn't put that into the net. It's terrifying to think that Bayern is doing this and Lewandowski is not playing particularly well. I mean, he could create a hat-trick on his own in the final. He's been that good this year. He's argued, he very well could have won the Ballon d'Or if it existed this year. And he has not been great these past couple games. And they're still scoring for fun. Putting up 8 against Barcelona. You get 3 here. Could have been more. Lyon had their chances. They were able to execute their game plan and get behind that Bayern defense because Bayern plays such a high line. And they went after Boateng a little bit. They were able to get in behind more than I thought they would. You got to take your chances and you got to give yourself an opportunity to stay in the game. Because you're going to get one of those brilliant moments from Bayern. Whether it's the Leon Goretzka flick against Barcelona, or something from Mueller, something from Lewandowski. This time it was from Gnabry. One of those is coming, and so you got to take your chances. You got to take every opportunity to compensate for that. And when you don't, your margin of error is just so slim against both of these teams. Bayern, PSG, because their talent level is so high, and specifically because Bayern gets so comfortable and is just playing so well right now. You got to do something to rattle them early. You can't let them get into a game and get a lead. They're just going to continue to grind at you and just wear the game down. And that's what you saw happen. I still think Lyon deserves an immense amount of credit. They played pretty well. They had a great showing for themselves, represented themselves excellently. But if you're trying to beat Bayern, you got to put those early chances away. You got to change the complexion of the game. And they weren't able to do that. So to me, that's the story of the semifinals. They were 2 very different games that ended with the same score. PSG was more comprehensive. Lyon, you just look at those early missed chances and their inability to convert. But at the end of the day, it comes down to the same thing, and that's margin of error. PSG, Bayern, Manchester City, usually Real Madrid, Barcelona, have, these great teams have this margin of error built in because of the talent they have and the experience they have. And the only way to compensate for that is exactly what Lyon did against Manchester City. You take your opportunities. When they make a mistake, you pounce on it. City lost that margin of error when Pep decided to go with three at the back, when they had some mistakes that led directly to, the Moussa Dembele's goals. That's how you compensate for it. It's not like Lyon was significantly worse again in this game than they were against City. It's just they didn't take their chances and Bayern didn't give them as many opportunities. And at the end of the day, that's the story. I am really happy these two teams got through, though. With all due respect to Leipzig and Lyon, these are the big boys. I want this game so badly. It's going to be phenomenal. The star power on the field on Sunday is going to be just incredible. It's two different teams. Of course, Bayern's been here before. But this iteration, when you take out Neuer, Boateng, Mueller, hasn't really. Lewandowski was still at Dortmund, when that team won the treble. And so this new era of Kimmich and Lewandowski and Gnabry, and you just go down the list, Alphonso Davies. They have not been in this situation before. And Bayern hasn't won this thing in long enough that I'm considering them a new team just because it's been so much Barcelona, so much Real Madrid, and Juventus has been that third team as we talked about before. And obviously PSG has never been here before. Yeah, say what you want about PSG, but I'm just happy they have the opportunity. I want to see them in this scenario. I want to see what Neymar can do, what Mbappe can do, where they are mentally. Because this is the best test you can ask for. Any team that can beat Bayern right now is absolutely deserving of this tournament, this trophy of being European champions. It's a phenomenal test for PSG. I don't want to share too many of my thoughts now because we're going to talk about it some more and what's next. But really looking forward to this. We got the best two teams. They had the built-in margin of error going into these games. Neither Leipzig nor Lyon was able to compensate for that margin of error, and the result is 3-0 performances, the better teams winning. Congratulations, Bayern, PSG. We're going to have a sensational game in the Champions League final. Other things are happening, though. We're going to talk also about the Europa League final and what's next. But there's some things that have happened this week I wanted to touch on here, and this just seemed like the best spot to do it. Firstly, that Rose Lavelle is joining Sam Mewis in Manchester City. They're both official now. This is probably more of a short-term thing. It's not like they're signing 5-year contracts here. I believe Lavelle's is 1 year with an option for a second. So this could be a very, very short-term, 1 year, just see how things go kind of situation. And to that point specifically for Rose Lavelle, OL Reign traded for her NWSL rights as this move was happening, when Washington knew that she wasn't coming back. You don't trade for somebody's rights if you don't think there's a good chance she's eventually going to return to the NWSL. So this is a short-term thing. As I talked about with Caroline Stanley a little while back, it's not like this is the first time that these premier U.S. internationals have gone over to play in Europe. Alex Morgan did it. The world is not ending from the NWSL perspective. It does sound like there's a chance that Christian Press and Tobin Heath also join this party on the other side of Manchester and go to United. That might change my thoughts on this a little bit. But at the end of the day, you've still got Alex Morgan, you've still got Carly Lloyd, you've still got Megan Rapinoe. The list goes on. It's not like these two players are saying goodbye to the NWSL forever. We'll see how things go, but quite frankly, in a pandemic, when you're just not sure what the NWSL is going to look like, and you participated in the Challenge Cup, the stability of Europe and the promise of actually handling COVID well and getting into situations where there's talk about fans coming back at some point during these next European seasons coming here. There's an appeal to that. And the other primary appeal that I don't think we pay as much attention to as we should on the women's side, and Rose Lavelle mentioned this, there is no equivalent to the Champions League, men's or women's, anywhere in the world. It's the premier club competition. It has the prestige. And so the idea of getting to go to Manchester City with those resources, with that infrastructure, and going and trying to win a Champions League and playing against your Lyons of the world and all of the other incredible talent that the rest of the world provides that are the teams, challenging the US in every World Cup and every Olympics. It's incredibly appealing. It's an exciting challenge. And that was a big part of this, I think, for Rose Lavelle specifically. And I don't know as much about where Mewis is on this, but I figured it's got to be a factor for her too. It's just there's something different about getting to play soccer in Europe, getting to play in the Champions League, getting to be ingrained in that culture and having that kind of experience. And so they're both going to go see what happens. There's no long-term commitment here. There's no huge risk. You just go, see how you feel. If you want to come back, of course the NWSL is going to welcome you with open arms. Maybe they find a way to play both eventually. Who knows? But I don't think this is a huge deal for the NWSL. I love players that want to challenge themselves, want to try something different. I think this only is good for both Mewis and Lavelle. It's a big enough deal I wanted to mention and share some thoughts. I don't have too much else to say, but it's something to keep an eye on to see if this starts a bigger trend that could potentially cause some issues for the NWSL. I'm just not sure that we're at that point yet. David Silva has also announced his destination. It is not Lazio, despite all of the reports. I almost actually brought this up when those Lazio reports started coming out, but I figured I'd wait until it was official, and, well, it's a good thing because he's a member of Real Sociedad, not Lazio. I'm not entirely sure why Lazio feels so snubbed and is so upset about this and is attacking David Silva's character. I don't know what happened in that conversation, obviously. But good for David Silva for kind of standing up for himself and saying, I never committed to anything. I never was official. I mean, maybe I can't say definitively that's him telling the truth, but it seems like this is just an unwarranted attack from Lazio. I'm sure they thought they had him, and of course it's disappointing. He's a terrific player, even at this stage in his career. So that was strange. It's just disappointing to see that as the response. Again, I don't know what happened. Maybe he did deceive them in some way. I'm not going to speculate on that. But I will say, from a big picture inside a vacuum perspective, I'm not surprised at all that David Silva went back home to Spain. He's been through a lot these past couple years, family-wise, with his child and just not being able to be there as much as he would like. Because he's playing for Manchester City. He's in England. It's tough. And he seems to be a terrific family guy who just really loves the people around him. And so it's got to be incredibly tough to not feel like you're able to be present and as involved as you want to be. And so all of a sudden, he's got an opportunity to pick where he goes. And so he said as much that, family and being in Spain was a huge part of this. Which is why I was kind of surprised the Lazio thing came up in the first place. And it very much seems like he was serious about it, that wasn't just coming out of nowhere. But my thought was always he's going back to Spain. And that turns out is what happened. Sociedad finished 6th in La Liga last season. Definitely a step behind your top four with Barcelona, Real Madrid, Atleti, and Sevilla. Obviously not in that order. But, it's an interesting project. Young talent. They could really use a player and a guy who's so experienced to just sort of set the tone and try and help this team get to the next level. They're not going to be challenging for a La Liga title anytime soon, I don't think. But you got Barcelona and Real Madrid in a little bit of a downturn. Atleti's got their issues. I mean, maybe. But I like this from Sociedad's perspective, and just David Silva gets to end his career back at home, which is really nice. So good for him. Weird circumstances, disappointing to see things end with Lazio that way. But David Silva, officially a member of Real Sociedad. Aaron Ramsdale is officially back at Sheffield United. Speaking of the Premier League, he was spent plenty of time in Sheffield's academy, and then went to Bournemouth. Bournemouth get relegated. He's one of those players you looked at along with Nathan Ake, Callum Wilson, David Brooks, of these guys who could very easily get sold just because you got to find a way to save some money. You got to generate some revenue, especially with COVID. And so Sheffield United goes and picks him back up. He's your starting goalkeeper next year. He's not quite Dean Henderson, but he's a solid keeper. He's not going to hurt you, which is objective number one in these situations, obviously. So I like it from Sheffield United's perspective. He's still young, got an opportunity to grow, and he just gives you some stability, a reliable guy in net to continue to try and build this thing into a sustainable top half of the Premier League, which is just incredible to think about. But can you continue to be as consistent as they were this season, stay out of the relegation battle, all those things? Ramsdale's going to help with that. And this also means Dean Henderson is officially going to be back at Manchester United, barring something unforeseen. It sounds like they're working on a new contract with him. I've said, and I'll say it again, I think United had to do this. You can't let him go. You've got to, at the very least, put pressure on David De Gea. To me, I'm starting Dean Henderson at the beginning of next season. I am scared with the amount of mistakes that De Gea has made. Henderson made one that I can think of that stands out against Liverpool. And he's made some really good saves too. It's not like he's just sort of makes the saves he's supposed to and doesn't make a catastrophic mistake. He's kept Sheffield United and won Sheffield United some games these past couple seasons. He's a really, really good goalkeeper. And if he, for some reason, doesn't work at United, if he can't handle the pressure, then you go back to De Gea. And maybe you just run Henderson for a couple months, and I've said this before, and all of a sudden De Gea is back in top form, and you make the switch. It's sort of awkward to have two goalkeepers, but I don't think Ole Gunnar Solskjaer had a choice. If you're going and you're really trying to compete both domestically and in Europe, maybe you save De Gea for the Champions League. And then when you get to the later stages, knockout rounds, you reevaluate which goalkeeper you feel like is playing better, but you give De Gea an opportunity in the group stage in games you should win. And then you go from, they got options. But I think they made the right call. You have to bring Henderson back. You got to give him an opportunity to win this job and to hold De Gea accountable and really push him and make sure that your goalkeeper's not making the amount of mistakes that happened this season. Because, again, we talk about margin of error. If you're going to try and... obviously, it's not quite the same because United have similar financial means to Liverpool and City. But if you're going and trying to catch those teams, you can't afford to have mistakes from the goalkeeper position the way that De Gea was playing these last couple seasons. It's got to be better. And I think Dean Henderson is how you solve that problem. Also, Ronald Koeman's official at Barcelona. I talked about this on Tuesday. I'm not going to go into more detail. I got questions. I'm skeptical. We're also going to touch on this in our supporters corner coming up in just a couple minutes here. But those are the news and notes, things that have happened, as well as obviously my thoughts on what happened in the Champions League semifinals. We're going to take our first break. When we come back, it is Supporters Corner time with Lawrence Kreymer. Really enjoyed this conversation. We're talking all things Barcelona with just the chaos right now and obviously the thrashing they took against Bayern. It's a really good conversation. That's coming up next. You're watching Touchline Talk on 110 Sports. And welcome back to Touchline Talk right here on 110 Sports. It's time for another edition of the Supporters Corner. Joining us this week is Lawrence Kreymer. Lawrence is a sports editor at the DePaul, which is DePaul University's student newspaper. He does terrific work there. Check out everything he's doing covering all DePaul things. Very interesting times at that school right now. Lawrence is also a Barcelona fan. And just following him on Twitter, we've gotten to know each other over the last couple of years as, Big East student journalists. I wanted to have Lawrence on to talk Barcelona when I was watching the Bayern-Barcelona game. It's one of the first thoughts that popped into my head was, let's try and get Lawrence this week. He knows this team inside and out. He's not afraid to tell you what he thinks, to voice his frustration with everything that's going on right now. I am just personally fascinated by this because I've just never quite seen something like this from a club as big as Barcelona. It's just unbelievable. The idea that Messi is actually contemplating leaving and the board and just the strange events that have happened and, of course, that culminating in an 8-2 loss to Bayern. So we talked to Lawrence about all things Barcelona, the hiring of Ronald Koeman, where this club needs to go next, what needs to happen transfer-wise, the future of Messi, how quickly this team can get back to where it belongs, to where it's been the past decade, all of those things. So without further ado, our conversation in the Supporters Corner with Lawrence Kreymer. Hey Lawrence, thanks so much for taking the time to be here. Really appreciate it.
Of course. Thanks for having me on.
The first thing I always like to ask people in this situation and when I do these interviews for the Supporters Corner is how did you get into soccer and how did you become a fan of the team you support? So for you, where did this journey with soccer in Barcelona start?
Yeah, I started playing soccer when I was around 6, and I kind of, played it up until high school and then into my freshman year, and then kind of playing it, I kind of became a fan. My family kind of was also a big soccer fan. We kind of grew up on that, so it's kind of always on the TV on Saturday and Sunday watching a lot of the European leagues. And then, being a Barcelona fan, I think that's when, at the time, it was kind of their rise around 2008, 2009 under, Guardiola, Messi. It was kind of that, their era really.
Right.
So I guess I can be considered a bandwagon in that sense. But you kind of, when you're a soccer fan, you pick. I guess you have to pick Real Madrid or Barcelona, one of the two, because I guess it's the biggest club rivalry in the world. So I guess I settled with Messi and Barcelona.
Was there something particular about, yeah, that sort of golden era, those phenomenal Barcelona and Spanish national teams, but particularly the Barcelona aspect that appealed to you about Pep and Messi, or something that sort of you remember that really caught your attention that made you decide this is the team I want to follow and support?
Yeah, I was actually a big fan of Ronaldinho at first,
Ah,
and he was obviously I'm probably too young to remember him a lot of his games, but I do remember watching him, and I did get to see him here in Soldier Field in Chicago when Brazil played the U.S. national team, and he was obviously a phenomenal player, and I think him being at Barcelona and kind of that was really at his peak. I can remember some of his best games, but yeah, watching him, I mean, he was absolutely unreal, and I think that kind of made me fall in love with him. And obviously, Messi came along, and then Guardiola came along, and then everything fell into place. But he was outstanding to watch, and I think that's why I fell in love with them at the
interesting.
beginning.
Okay. Yeah, and then it always helps when Messi comes in there to sort
Yeah,
of keep the train rolling. So, and there's a lot I want to get to about what's happening right now, but I want to start with a simple question that is, what was going through your head as you were watching that Bayern Munich game from the beginning, where it looked like this could sort of go either way? Both teams had chances, to the final obviously being 8-2. Just what was going through your head as you were watching that game?
yeah. I was watching it while I'm talking to one of my friends over the phone. So it was like I told him I think we're gonna lose this game before it started. I just the way Bayern came into this game, they obviously dominated the Bundesliga and they had a lot of momentum. And Barcelona, there was a lot of question marks about them. Obviously, they choked La Liga really, and they weren't playing very well coming into that, and they kind of got maybe a little bit lucky and snappy. So I thought to myself that this is gonna be a tough game. And then at the start, when it was like 0-0 before Bayern scored the second, it was the first or second minute. I think Boateng, kind of cleared a great pass from Sergio Roberto that was going to get to Suarez, and then that could have possibly made it 1-0. And then there was a couple of minutes later a poor giveaway from Busquets, and then that Bayern scored 1-0. But then Barcelona came back, and then they had a couple of chances to go up 2 or 3-1.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think if they maybe converted one of those, I think the Suarez chance was huge. I mean, 1-on-1, you got to score that. Um, and then the Messi one hit the post, but there's four guys wide open. If one guy finds that, it's probably in the back of the net. So, and then after that, I think defensively they're all over the place. Barcelona, they're not athletic, they're not fast enough to kind of cope with the Bayern Munich, especially in transition. And I think as soon as they got to 4-1, I know they made it 4-2, but at that point, it's kind of head started to drop, and it was pretty much game over after that.
You mentioned a couple of those things, right? The defense was in shambles for most of the game. You talked about, right, the lack of pace and just the age of this team. Obviously, you've got major issues with the board, the relationship with Messi. For you, what is the biggest change you want to see, or the top priority moving forward as you start this new era and sort of turn a page and try and get Barcelona back to being, where they belong at the top of the European echelon?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. I think obviously a lot of people want to see the board move on, but I think that's a bigger issue. And you don't change that in one day, um, as well as you can't change the roster in one transfer window. But I think PK after the game came out and said he basically said if the team wants me or needs me to leave, I will go.
Yep.
And
Mm-hmm.
I think that says a lot about kind of obviously he loves the club, and it just shows how far they've fallen. But they've had these problems for a while now. It's arguably been since the collapse against Roma in the quarterfinals a couple years ago that where they really need to start making changes. And that's when PK and Messi and Suarez are all still like 30 years old. Um, and after last year's Liverpool loss, that's when they really needed changes. I think they should have fired Valverde after that instead of giving him half a year. You at least if you fire him then, you give the new coach the summer to kind of get to train with the team. You really gave Setien no time to do anything really. And they didn't really replace anyone. I mean, I know they brought in Griezmann, but they didn't change anything with the defense. They brought in Frankie De Jong, but they didn't play him in the right spot. They kept
Yep.
playing Busquets in the holding role. I mean, he's just not at the level anymore where he's keeping up with some of those Bayern midfielders. I think they needed to really change the team. The defensive line needs to get better. I mean, Semedo got exposed. I mean, I've been saying it for a long time now to other people that their fullbacks are an issue. But especially Semedo. I mean, he was poor. The Davies assist. I mean, he just got. Flat out embarrassed.
Yep.
And then you look at the midfield, and it's when you have Roberto, Vidal, and Busquets starting. I mean, you have no creativity really. I mean, I know Busquets kind of is known for his passing, but he's lost out there at this point. Sergio Roberto doesn't offer anything, and Vidal's just they were playing him when the formations came out. It says he was going to be the cam, but then he was playing as a left wing, and I was like, if you're going to play him as a left wing, you might as well play Griezmann, Fati, or Dembele and try to expose him. I think that was their really only hope, and I think Setien made a mistake there. When they were still in the game, they were getting in behind. If they had a Dembele or Fati to kind of get in behind instead of having Vidal, you maybe have a different story here. But they need a whole change of players. The only players I would keep from that starting 11 is Messi and Ter Stegen. Everyone else, maybe Lenglet and De Jong. That's pretty much it. Everyone else, they need a complete and full rebuild.
You mentioned Setien and right this idea that he was sort of thrown into the fire, didn't have much time at all to do anything really to put his imprint on this club. Do you feel like he got a fair shot and that this firing had to happen just because it never felt like he had control of this team and had buy-in from these guys? Or do you feel like he needed whatever this weird transfer window break between the seasons is going to be and deserved an opportunity, even with as poor as you mentioned, the season finished both La Liga-wise and Champions League-wise? Do you feel like it was too quick, or do you feel like he needed to go and they needed to just hit the reboot button completely?
Yeah, I think he needed to go. It's not all his fault, and it's definitely not fair to blame everything on him. But Valverde got a lot of criticism, and I criticized him a lot on Twitter, and I said he should have been gone after the Liverpool game. But at least he won the La Liga twice, and he had them again. Not playing as well this season, but they fired him after the Atletico Madrid game in the cup when they was like playing in some different country, and that was arguably their best game of the season, even though they lost it. So I think it's for Setien. I think he needed to go. I don't think he's the right manager. He was supposed to be this guy that comes in and kind of goes back to the old ways of Barcelona, but then again in the big game he goes to a 4-4-2, and there's no stability there in the defensive line. So I think you need a new manager if you're going full reboot. And I don't think Messi ever, I don't say respect is the right word, but I don't think they ever got along. I don't think he earned the respect of some of the key players in the roster. So I think you need to go in a different way if you're trying to rebuild this team, because clearly he didn't get the job done. And in Barcelona, it's you have to win trophies, and this is I think their first year without one single trophy since the 07-08 year. And we know what happened after that. Guardiola comes in, and I'm not saying that's going to happen with their new coach, but you kind of need to make changes if you want to get back to winning ways.
Yeah, and so that change is Ronald Koeman. Thoughts? Do you like this? Does it make sense to you? Do you see potential? Or is this just another puzzling thing that you're not sure how it's going to work?
Yeah, I think if the roster is the same, it doesn't really matter. I just, the game has evolved where you need pace, you need athleticism. And Coleman's he comes from the Cruyff mentality. He's obviously Dutch, and their mentality is keep the ball, total football. So he's going to try to bring the Barcelona back to the old ways, and that's fine. They can try and do that, but you need midfielders to do that. You can't rely on Sergio Roberto, who's not very creative, and you can't rely on Vidal to be your creative midfielders. You look at Bayern, and they have Thiago pulling all the strings. Barcelona sold him, another mistake by them, but That's a different debate. But you need a new midfield, and you need defensemen who can press and press up high, or else it's just going to be the same story. Because if you're going to try and press with 33-year-olds, I mean, Suarez can't run anymore. And I
Right.
know there's rumors about him, you know, leaving the club, and I think it's probably time for him to go. But again, I mean, how much money are they going to spend? Obviously, we're in a pandemic, and Bartomeu said, we're going to rely on some of the younger players. But again, they're relying on those younger players because they have no choice now. And will they be able to compete at the highest level? I'm not sure. I think, I don't think they'll be as bad of a year next year as it was this year. But again, Real Madrid they're arguably this is their era now after Barcelona dominated for 10 years. And if they can't revamp the squad in time for the start of the year, and they only got a month really until the new season kicks off. It's not going to change. You need the correct players if you're going to play that type of system that Coleman wants to. I mean, currently, they don't have it. They're going to be completely lost, and they will get exposed in the bigger games, and eventually, that will cost Coleman and other managers unless fresher and younger blood come into the roster.
Do you take any hope or solace from the fact that, Koeman is, like you mentioned, from the Cruyff coaching tree philosophy, whatever you want to call it, has obviously the connections to Barcelona. The fact that this is a Barcelona guy who understands what this team looks like when it's successful, does that mean much to you at this point? Or is it just sort of we need to go in whatever direction is going to get us the best manager? For example, Mauricio Pochettino or somebody like that, if he would have taken the job. I mean, he's got the Espanol connection. Who knows what actually happened there, what conversation? But how much stock do you put in to the fact that Koeman is a Barcelona guy who thinks the same way that this club does traditionally?
I think there's some stock to it. I think there's some, kind of going back to what made you great. But again, like I touched on earlier, the game has developed where you look at Liverpool when they won last year and then winning the Premier League. They have athleticism, they have pace, and they have young players on the roster. Same thing with Bayern this year.
Yep.
Look at PSG now; their front two. I mean, it's all pace, and that's what you need now. You need to have. I think in soccer you need to have the spine of the team to be strong, the goalkeeper to the striker. But then now you see some of the wingers that these teams have. I mean, Bayern, even today, Gnabry, and scoring 2 goals. You see how many they have Coleman and Coutinho coming off the bench,
Right.
and Coutinho is obviously a former Barca player. And I don't think Barcelona have the correct players right now. So, and there's still a lot of question marks about Coleman. I mean, is he a great manager? Obviously, he went to Everton and he failed there.
Yep.
He went back to the national team, and in Holland, he's had a lot of success there, and it'll be interesting to see what he could have done in the Euros this year. But again, the players need to change. You need to bring in different players because you're just going to keep getting the same results in the big games if you stick with the same roster. And I find with keeping some of the old players like PK, Messi sticking around because you still can use them. Obviously, Messi's still great and everything, but likes of a PK or a Busquets, they can play, but not against the Bayern. They can play in games in La Liga when you're rotating, but when you're going up against these big teams, they're just going to press you, and you're just going to lose the ball. So I think again, it's all going to come down to which players will come in and which players will go, and if a change of mentality will happen. If it's the same thing or nearly the same type of game plan going into next year, they're not going to win the league and they will not compete for the Champions League.
And to that end, my second to last question here is sort of two parts. One, how far do you think this team is from getting back to where it was 5 years ago? We saw how quickly Bayern turned things around. It took, the firing of one manager, the emergence of Alphonso Davies, and the reinsertion of Thomas Mueller into the lineup with a couple good signings, and all of a sudden they're the best team in the world from a team that, couldn't get to the Champions League semifinals the last couple seasons under Niko Kovac. And secondly, is Messi part of the next era of Barcelona? Do you want him to stay? Do you think it's time, even if you do want him to stay, for those two sides to just go their separate ways? Where are you on that, and how far do you think this club is from getting back to where it should be?
No, I think they're. I would say anything can change. I think, like you said, Bayern went from being in the and losing in the round of 16 last year to Liverpool to now being in the finals of the Champions League. So obviously, it can change and it can change fast. I think it will a lot of it will depend. A lot of can these young players that are coming up from La Masia, and some of them have already, Ricky Puig, Ansu Fati, can they really step up and kind of contribute early on in the season? Um, and some of the current players can, like a Dembele, kind of regain his form. What will happen in Griezmann? So, it will be interesting to see what happens. I think, I still think they're a couple years away from kind of maybe a year or two from revamping the squad and getting back to where they need to be. Um, so yeah, I think this year might be a struggle, but again, it can change. Obviously, there are question marks about Real Madrid going into the season,
Hmm.
of how Zidane will kind of, because they had a horrible preseason. I know that's now 12 months ago, but you know, and they came back and they won La Liga, and we don't anticipate 2021 to kind of go like 2020 went, where the season gets stopped midway through. And who knows if the season doesn't get stopped, maybe Barcelona goes on and wins La Liga. Um, and kind of answering your second question, I tweeted out I think it's time for Messi to go for his own personal sake, because he's trying to win the Champions League, and he went from at 27 years old or 28 having four and possibly getting to six or seven after seeing what that Barcelona team did in 2015 to having so many heartbreaks since then in the Champions League. Where how much more can you take of this, of just continuously losing? And he's played well throughout the season. Um, where I think if you're Barcelona, obviously going to try to keep him. He's everything. You lose him, and all bets are off. You're not even competing for a La Liga title. He's the only reason they were in it this year for the most part. So as a Barcelona fan, I would love to see him stay, obviously. But if you're Messi, you're obviously, I think you're evaluating all your options, because if City comes calling, why wouldn't you go pair up with Pep Guardiola again and the roster they have? Who knows if Messi's there instead of Sterling on that chance against
Yeah.
Leon? I mean, we're having maybe a different discussion about City today, and maybe they're in the Champions League final instead of Bayern. So I think if you're Messi at this point, you've got to think, how many more chances do I have to win this thing? And is Barcelona the club to get back to that point, or are we kind of past that point where I need to go and find a new challenge? And if he does, I accept it, because I would love to see him in the Premier League or another league and kind of prove all those doubters wrong. And I would obviously be grateful for everything he's done for the team. So I wouldn't hold anything against him if he decided um, to move on, obviously.
And yeah, that's a great way to put it. Of right, do you feel like Barcelona is the place where you can win the Champions League again? What are your other options? What teams are willing to pay that salary? Because
Yeah.
that's part of it too. Okay, final thing you've mentioned we have a Champions League final now. Bayern, PSG. Initial reactions, thoughts. Who do you think's gonna win? What are you looking for in this matchup?
Yeah, I think I'm so excited about this final, because I think it's obviously two attacking teams.
Mm-hmm.
And it was the best possible option we could have got out of the two semifinals.
Agreed.
I think Bayern right now are the favorites slightly, just because they have I think the better overall team, the better, starting 11. But if Mbappe and Neymar can get in behind that back line, I know Neymar's missed a lot of chances these last two games, but I don't think, they're missing what Leon did today. I mean, they obviously had it open, they hit the post. They had another one-on-one today where Neuer saved it. I mean, I think PSG will create more than two or three chances as well. So if they do get in behind and they do create some chances, I think PSG could steal this one, because even though I know Lewandowski scored two goals these last two games, but again, he didn't look great today. I don't think so, in my opinion. Um, I think maybe having Marquinhos as that CDM for PSG might be the key to kind of disrupt some stuff for Bayern. But again, if Gnabry puts another great performance, if Lewandowski kind of continues his scoring streak, and then Bayern could probably pull it off. But I might give the edge to PSG, to maybe 3-2, 4-3, high scoring game, just because Neymar and Mbappe are so fast. Um, it'll be fun to see if Davies and Mbappe go on trying to get a
Yeah.
loose ball or through ball for Mbappe. Who gets there first? And I think it could be close, because obviously Mbappe is really fast. So I'm kind of leaning towards PSG right now. even though Bayern are probably the favorites, just because Neymar, Mbappe, and maybe Di Maria will just finish their chances off better than Barca did on Friday or Leon did today.
Yeah, I'm right there with you. I think that yeah, I feel like PSG could definitely steal this one. It's going to be a great matchup. This is what I wanted to.
Yeah,
Two high-powered teams. We're going to have a great matchup here. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for taking the time, Lawrence. Really appreciate it, and enjoy the final couple of games of this season. And always, excited to get ready for the next one. So thanks so much.
of course. Thanks for having me on.
Thanks again to Lawrence for taking the time to talk to us. Really enjoyed getting his perspective on everything happening at Barcelona right now, what needs to happen moving forward, where things went wrong to get to this position in the first place. Like I said before, I'm just fascinated by everything happening at that club right now. So really appreciate Lawrence providing his perspective. We'll take a quick break. When we come back, it's time for what's next. Europa League final, Champions League final. MLS is also back in full swing. Plenty more to get to. Don't go anywhere. Welcome back once again to Touchline Talk. We're just going to get right into it. There is so much happening these next couple of days. It's time for what's next. We're just going to roll right through. Today, Thursday, August 20th, Hudson River Derby, New York Red Bulls, NYCFC, Columbus, Chicago, New England, Philadelphia. These are just a couple of the MLS games happening. We're not going to go through every MLS game over the weekend starting tonight. There are just too many. We don't know what these teams look like. And we've got two European finals to talk about that are going to take precedence. Real quickly, though, NYCFC is looking to get back on track. 3 points from 5 games so far this season. Red Bulls have looked good at times, not so great at others. It's not that NYCFC has been bad, they just haven't been able to get the points. Columbus, although they did not end up winning MLS's back cup, it's still on top of the East with 4 wins and a draw based on their form before the shutdown and down in Orlando. They're playing really well. Philadelphia is looking to build off of their semifinal appearance and MLS is back. These are your regional games trying to reduce travel, but those are the matchups for today. These are some of the better teams in the league. I'm really curious to see what Columbus does in particular. But that, we've got MLS back in full swing, which is always a good thing. Then we go to Friday, obviously highlighted by the Europa League final, Inter Milan Sevilla. Not going to get too in depth here because I really want to focus on the Champions League final at the end. But I will say, Inter Milan are the favorite. I like Inter to win this game. But that doesn't scare Sevilla. You saw it against Manchester United. They just find ways to win games. I'm going with Inter because Sevilla haven't been particularly convincing in the way that they've won. They just kind of come up with some opportunities and take advantage, which is absolutely a key in what you want out of your team. But I just think Inter are playing at such a high level that, again, margin of error, it's just not going to be quite enough. But this should be a really good game. I think this is an interesting matchup. I like the teams. So definitely something to pay attention to. Don't get too caught up in the Champions League and forget that we've got another really good European final as well. MLS-wise, Minnesota supporting Kansas City, 1 versus 2 in the West. Still not quite sure what to make of Kansas City. They were really good, and then they just had some shaky moments. Alan Pulido's been great. I'm high on this team. I think they could be really good, but I haven't seen enough to be sold on that idea yet. Minnesota just continues to impress. And then you got Houston and FC Dallas. They have 1 win between them. One of these teams has got to get going. It starts with getting 3 points in this game. This is you got to get some momentum built up for these MLS teams. You don't have all that long, and you're already talking about the playoffs. So these teams that didn't perform well at MLS is back, that had some bad performances at the beginning of the season, you got to start making up those points now. Saturday, all kinds of games, MLS wise. Starting with El Trafico. The Galaxy are at the bottom of the Western Conference. The Galaxy don't look good. LAFC should have Carlos Vela back. We'll see what role Chicharito plays. There hasn't been much news about. I think he's probably healthy. It hasn't been that long since MLS is back, though. There just hasn't been that many updates, so we'll see what happens there. Atlanta, Nashville. Atlanta's going to, first game under manager Stephen Glass, who came from Atlanta 2, their reserve team. He's a caretaker. They got to go get somebody else. I don't think anybody's under the impression he's got a real shot at this job. But you got to find a way to start making up for that awful showing they had in Orlando. Speaking of Orlando, Orlando City plays Inter Miami again. They started off MLS's back tournament. Miami's the only team in MLS without a point. Again, you're running out of time. I think this team can still pull things together. They've been unlucky. They haven't been playing all that poorly. You got Blaise Matuidi now. But again, you got to start doing this now. It starts with winning this rivalry game. Colorado RSL. Colorado, not quite sure what to make of them either. They looked good. I was really high on them coming into MLS's back tournament, just in terms of their potential this season, specifically before the COVID struck and the league got shut down. But they did not look great in Orlando. It's a different world when you're just playing regular season games instead of a knockout tournament. But I'm very curious to see, RSL is going to be a good challenge. Can Colorado build some momentum here and make good on the potential that they have and all of the really good things you've seen from them under Robin Fraser since he took over? And then finally, we get to Sunday. First, it seems like Portland and Seattle, this is at least the second time have played each other on the day of the Champions League final, because I explicitly remember watching this game after Andre Schurrle scored. Oh no, it was the World Cup final. Sorry, that was the World Cup final. So they seem to play each other on big random days like this. When Schurrle set up the goal for Germany, so that was Götze against Argentina. I believe Portland and Seattle also played that day. That's not remembering that more vividly. But this is a great rivalry. This is, I kind of like Seattle in this game. Upset about how things went down in MLS's back tournament. Portland's coming off of a grueling tournament where they had to play every game possible and had to put their best players out there. I think Seattle's going to win. Just my opinion there. Okay. Real quick, I want to highlight a couple things about this PSG Bayern game. In terms of keys, I'm looking at 2 in particular. Bayern's fullbacks against PSG's wingers. Can Alphonso Davies and my gut says it's going to be Benjamin Pavard. It might be Kimmich, whoever's playing on the right. Can the two of them be involved in the attack enough, A, to make Bayern that dangerous? Because that's part of why they're so good, is you get situations where Alphonso Davies is setting up goals and Kimmich is playing in crosses and taking free kicks, and they're just so good at utilizing their fullbacks as part of this very dangerous, lethal forward group that they've got. Can they hold on to the ball? Can they get them involved in the attack up the field to stop PSG's wingers, Neymar, Mbappe, Di Maria, from running at them all game? That's big, because you don't want those guys to have the ability to just continue to attack you. And secondly, with this, can they do enough defensively to stop these real pacey guys from PSG from getting in behind? Lawrence sort of alluded to this in our conversation, and I completely agree. With the high line Bayern plays, there's space in behind. And so if you're Alfonso Davies or you're whoever's playing on the right and you get caught in possession, that's what Lyon were trying to do, and they were successful. They just couldn't put the ball in the back of the net. There's space there. And so instead of that being Memphis Depay or somebody else, that's Mbappe, that's Neymar, that's Di Maria that's coming at you. So the more that PSG can have that space to operate, can be able to get in behind, can get Bayern out of position, the more dangerous they're going to be in this game. So that's one key. The other one I'm looking at is Marquinhos versus the Bayern midfield, particularly Thomas Mueller, but also whoever's going to start on the wings, Gnabry, Perisic, Coman, whatever combination there. Can Marquinhos do enough to just frustrate them a little bit and to make the game a little bit choppier and not have them feel confident and be in this rhythm with the attack? And I'll throw Leon Grotzky into this conversation too. They're just so well drilled and they're so well connected. It's such a smooth operation under Hansi Flick. Can Marquinhos do enough to just disrupt that a little bit, make them a little bit off their game? Maybe it saves a goal or prevents a couple scoring opportunities, and that's the difference in this game. And the other thing is quite simply, can PSG finish? There are going to be chances, there are going to be goals scored in this game. I completely agree with Lawrence. PSG has every opportunity to win this thing. It's not a terrible matchup for them. And of course, they have the talent to beat anybody in the world. But this comes down to when you're in the positions that Barcelona found at the beginning of the game and that Lyon found at the beginning of the game, can you put them away? Can you put the ball in the net? Can you make Bayern chase this game? Because Bayern has not come out all that impressive in the first 15 or so minutes of these couple games. Lewandowski hasn't been at his best. There is another level Bayern can get to, which is a terrifying thought, but is also just the reality of the situation. This could easily be 3-2, 4-3 if PSG can take their chances and make this thing fun. I really like this matchup. I really like the way this is going to look stylistically. I think it's going to be a phenomenal game. And it's going to be different than most of your sort of grind it out, slug it out finals, I feel like. I sort of talk myself into that, and then it ends up being 1-0. But I'm going to say that this is going to be, there's going to be at least 4 goals. I'll say there's 5. I'm taking Bayern 3-2, but it could really go either way. I think this is perfectly situated. Really, really looking forward to it. I will have my preview up on 110sportsmedia.com in the coming days. It'll be there at least 24 hours before the game kicks off on Sunday. That's all we have for you today on Touchline Talk. Thank you so much for listening. Enjoy the end to the European season, MLS return, all of that great stuff. And we will be back on Tuesday with complete reaction to everything. Chris Brown is coming up right in an hour with Around the Bases. Josh Molnix will be doing his thing tomorrow. Got plenty happening, 110sportsmedia.com. Sign up for the newsletter. That's all for today. Thanks so much for tuning in. Enjoy the soccer. We'll see you Tuesday.